Greco-Turkish relations have never been good. This summer, they have soured further, over control of the seas. So this video asks, if the two would actually go to war over the Eastern Mediterranean Sea, which side would emerge victorious? Earlier French and Turkish ships saw tensions over Libya, and France is supporting Greece in these new tensions, even threatening Turkey. Would then a French intervention change the balance of the forces? Oh, and our graphy just got a third chapter. Our exploration of technology and innovations transforming warfare through the ages goes on. In the third chapter, we cover the medieval era and explore the biggest changes in ways to wage war. All the chapters are available via the Graphy mobile app. More chapters will be added. Click the link below to check it out. The Aegean Sea is already a hotspot. Maritime borders and exclusive economic zone borders are disputed by both sides. Some of the Greek islands are right next to Turkey, having been granted to Greece after the Second World War. Their demilitarized status is disputed, not to mention the whole deal about Cyprus in the East Med. Populated by a Greek majority, Cyprus saw a Turkish invasion after a pro-Greek coup d'etat in the 1970s, after which the island was split. The tensions today are high, and both sides have been in an arms race for decades. If a war broke out, both would mobilize their ships and planes as quickly as possible. The Greek Air Force is quite big, considering Greece is neither very populous nor a GDP powerhouse. Turkey is much bigger, especially population-wise, yet its Air Force isn't proportionally that much stronger. Both sides have the F-16 as their mainstay fighter. Both have modernized it fairly well, with only a few dozen remaining on each side of the older Block 30 variant capability. The Turkish F-16 force is more numerous, but they're pretty much the only air-to-air fighters Turkey can count on. The Greeks have another 70 or so planes that are fairly capable at air-to-air combat. Their old F-4s have been upgraded to use AMRAAM missiles. Turkish F-4 planes were upgraded to deliver precision airstrikes, but in air-to-air combat they're still lacking. And the shown F-5s are basically airshow planes and trainers, good perhaps for chasing subsonic planes without escort. Turkey had bought the stealthy F-35s, but those have never been delivered due to US sanctions. Greece has just recently ordered some French-made Rafales, but service entry is unlikely before 2022. Geography would play a big role in the air war. Greece is more compact, easier to reach for the Turks, but also easier to defend for the Greeks due to its size. Turkish air forces would start off spread out, with their planes based in the east of the country having a hard time operating near Greece. However, the recent sea dispute was near Cyprus, where sea survey and drilling ships were involved. There, it is Greece which would be harder pressed to maintain presence in the air. Trying to match Turkish might, the Greek Air Force did cut some corners, one of which is lack of aerial refueling tankers. Patrolling those disputed areas near Cyprus would be quite problematic, with Greek planes having several times shorter time on patrol there compared to Turkish ones. And that's before Turkey starts using their tanker fleet. With it, it could easily have 50 or so planes patrolling for 8 hours straight if needed. Or it could try and strike Greek targets using a variety of roundabout routes, thus increasing their chance of success. Airbases and ports on the island of Crete would be important targets. Crete is a forward bastion where Greece could operate from, being closer to Cyprus. Now, attacking airbases means attacking actual sovereign soil of a country. That may or may not happen, as it could be seen as escalation of the conflict. If the sea scuffles grow from some ships firing onto each other into whole fleets supported by aircraft, then all bets would be off. Air war over the seas would be as assured as sea battles, and it's very hard to keep the genie in the bottle. If one side is better in the air, the other side would automatically try to hit them where it hurts, possibly leveling the playing field by attacking the air bases themselves. For example, the Greek islands just off Turkey might be very much under threat, especially if the Greeks decide to use them as platforms for radars and surface-to-air systems, projecting their reach well into Turkey proper. The Turkish Air Force does have more planes capable of delivering guided weapon ground strikes. Furthermore, Greek Mirage 2000 jets have a limited guided air-to-ground arsenal at their disposal. Besides air-to-air interceptions, their main role would be strikes with anti-ship missiles and standoff missiles like Scalp EG. Still, their inventory is dwarfed by the Turkish inventory of standoff missiles. Turkey's domestic arms industry is quite robust, and they have been making their own high-tech missiles for a while now. It is evident that just by using standoff missiles, Turkey could paralyze quite a number of Greek assets, hitting targets like airbases, ports, logistics centers, and so on. Ballistic missiles, which both sides have, might also be used to engage some island assets, but Turkey has hundreds more and of longer reach. Of course, the brunt of the fighting may happen on the seas. Both navies are predominantly geared for littoral warfare, but have some larger ships as well. The Greek naval fleet is spearheaded by their Hydra-class frigates, basically German Meko 200 designed ships. They're fairly modernized and potent for their size. They feature a hangar for Seahawk helicopters, Harpoon anti-ship missiles, and modern ESSM SAM system. Older LE-class frigates are less useful, but 6 of those have had their electronics modernized. All ships are of Dutch design, and some of the older ones were bought second-hand in the 1990s. They carry 2 smaller helicopters, Harpoon missiles, and older Sea Sparrow anti-air missiles. Turkey's large surface combatants are composed of US Perry-class frigates. Some have been thoroughly modernized. 4 carry potent ESSM missiles, while another 4 rely on the older SM-1 missile launcher. Turkey too uses Meko 200 frigates, in their Barbaros class. All use ESSM missiles, but 2 carry as many as 64 of those, making them formidable area denial platforms. The Yavuz class is also composed of Meko frigates, but they have hardly been upgraded since the 1980s. They feature a hangar for a smaller helicopter, Harpoon missiles, and the older Sea Sparrow anti-air system. Unlike Greece, the Turkish Navy also has corvette-sized ships. Their Ada-class ships are fairly modern. Due to their size, they lack medium-range anti-air assets, but still feature a hangar for a Seahawk helicopter and Harpoon missiles. 6 Burak corvettes are old French ships. They're small and armed with anti-ship missiles. Both navies rely on fast attack boats armed with missiles, and Turkey has slightly more. All those ships would find themselves in a flurry of attacks and counterattacks around the island-rich Aegean Sea. Greek fast attack boats would likely not venture out to the open sea, near Cyprus though, as they lack endurance and anti-air assets. Turkish boats based closer and enjoying air cover might still make rounds around Cyprus. Perhaps a crucial role would be played by submarines. Both sides invested quite a bit in those. All Turkish subs are of German Type 209 design, built from the late 1970s to the mid-2000s. The Greek submarine fleet features 1 boat fewer, but theirs are somewhat more modern. 7 are of the similar 209 design, though one of those has been modernized with air-independent propulsion. That enables it to operate quietly for a few weeks at a time. Older battery-powered subs could remain quiet only for a few days. The Greek main force would likely be the 4 modern Type 214 submarines, which were commissioned in the last decade. Though they had their share of technical issues initially, they should be the quietest subs around, perfect for those littoral ambushes or even venturing out near Cyprus with their air-independent propulsion. Submarines would be hunted from the air as well, but over the Aegean Sea that would be a risky affair due to both sides' fighter interceptors. Closer to Cyprus, the Turks would have the upper hand and could utilize their aerial anti-submarine assets better, somewhat neutralizing the Greek technological advantage. The war on the seas would rage on, and slowly but surely the Greeks would realize they can't match the Turkish numbers farther out, towards Cyprus. That far away, the Turks would enjoy aerial supremacy. At the same time, the two fleets aren't equally matched. The Turks have 3 more frigates, 10 more corvettes, and 1 more fast attack boat. Furthermore, Turkish ships have better anti-air assets. So Turkish ships would thus be better at defending against Greek anti-ship missiles, and Greek air attacks would be less numerous out in the Med. Where the Greeks would hold their own is in the Aegean Sea. Since most of the islands there are Greek, they form a network, which would be used for various sensors for detecting and engaging both ships and planes. Greece currently operates 2 coastal batteries with Exocet anti-ship missiles mounted on trucks. But perhaps the more worthy force multiplier would be the varied Greek SAM network. That's one area where Turkey is quite behind, both technologically and numerically. While Turkey does operate some S-400 SAM batteries, on the average the Turks are still behind. The Greeks have doubled their long-range SAM systems and have more medium-range systems, but are behind in short-range ones. Once again, Turkey might very well be tempted to deal with SAMs on close-by islands by invading them, but that would escalate this hypothetical analysis into a broader war. As surveillance is one of the most important aspects of a war, it's important to mention Turkey's advantage in aerial recon. Their drone force is much bigger, as the Turkish aerospace industry is making a name for itself in the unmanned aircraft sector. Both sides have the same number of AWACS-type planes, though Turkey's are larger and possibly somewhat better in the air surveillance role. Greece shares control of 2 high-resolution surveillance satellites with France and Spain, while Turkey has 3 recon satellites of its own. Overall, the Greeks would find it hard to hold off their neighbors completely. The Turkish standoff missile edge would be used to negate much of the Greek early local numerical superiority in the air over the Aegean, by shutting down some Greek air bases. Later on, the Turks would have enough advantage in the air to seize and keep control of the eastern Mediterranean, but not the Aegean Sea. Any Greek venture southeast of Crete would cost them dearly, and it's possible it would not even be attempted. Without outside help, the Greeks would simply not be able to control that part of the Med, let alone access to Cyprus for supplies or any other needs if the war escalates. They could, of course, inflict serious damage to Turkish forces, both in the air and especially to the surface ships, but only by losing even more platforms of their own. It would be an unwise exchange. Enter France, which has been the most vocal Greek ally in recent months. If they lend a hand, the balance of power could change quite a bit. Now, the French have all sorts of systems, but let us limit ourselves to an expeditionary force only. They could likely send a few squadrons of their Air Force's Rafale aircraft and have them operate in western Greece, somewhat protected from the Turks by distance and other Greek assets. Some of the French SAM systems would also likely be flown in. If such deployment is deemed politically too risky, France could always operate some planes from the French island of Corsica. The distance is considerable, but since France has a robust aerial tanker fleet, it would still be manageable. France would likely send several dozen Rafales, their top-of-the-line fighters. They're more modern and a bit more capable than anything Greece or Turkey have. Their somewhat smaller radar signature, coupled with modern AESA radars, advanced jamming equipment and long-reach Meteor air-to-air missiles would likely make a difference over the Aegean Sea. Greek and French fighters alone would likely greatly reduce Turkish presence in the Med, and especially strikes on the Greek soil. But the French Navy would also get involved, perhaps even more so as some of their ships would have to move into the eastern Mediterranean in order to maintain control there. That would not likely happen at once, but only after enough of Turkey's air force and navy is whittled down from afar, which would likely take months. And that's months after the initial few months needed for France to assemble its forces and react. Still, the naval forces France could ultimately send are considerable. Out of 11 destroyer-sized and 11 frigate-sized ships, France would likely be able to send half of that number, and likely most of their submarine force, which numbers 10 boats in total, but 4 are strategic submarines, which would likely not be risked. One might be sent on a station somewhere in the southeastern Mediterranean, observing with passive sensors. Most of the 6 attack submarines would, however, be very potent weapons. They're nuclear-fueled, which means they could remain on station for a few months if needed. They could achieve speed dashes that conventional subs couldn't, and they could do it all fairly quietly. Perhaps the most visible element of the French intervention might be their aircraft carrier, Charles de Gaulle. Since there's just one available, there's a possibility that it might need a few months to get ready for a deployment, depending on the exact moment the war starts. The de Gaulle would likely operate another 24 Rafale aircraft and 2 E-2 aerial surveillance planes. France would likely keep its carrier well away from most threats though, but the Rafales have enough range to compensate for that. The whole operation would not come cheap though. France would surely lose several ships, possibly a submarine, and perhaps a few dozen various aircraft. And that's just to keep Turkey from controlling the Eastern Mediterranean. Turkey would still likely be able to periodically send some supplies and arms to Cyprus, if it wanted to. So, if Greece and France wanted to make a stand there as well, even more French forces would be needed, possibly mustering the majority of both the French Air Force and Navy. Of course, if Cyprus, which is another EU country, is attacked, it would be likely that more countries would join in against Turkey. The British have territories on Cyprus with military bases. At times, the US military also operates from those. The battle for the Med would thus be a bloody affair. The Greeks could defend most of the Aegean Sea, but not the Mediterranean. The Turks could not be fully stopped without at least one of the European powers' intervention. If you're interested in a hypothetical ground war between Turkey and Greece, including battles on Cyprus, we recommend one of our older videos. The link to Turkey versus Greece is available in the video description below. And remember, Binkov may talk about hypothetical wars, but only real peace can bring us all together.